How is everybody doing today? I am your host, American Lumberjack, aka Frankie, and you are watching TimberTalk, navigating the political forest, where we navigate the forest of politics with truth, conspiracy, and some Bible. I am so glad to be here today with you guys, and I hope I am coming through loud and clear for everybody to hear. Sound check, mic check, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and all those other good things in between. So I would just wait on confirmation if you guys can hear me. Do I get a clear thumbs up? Do I look good over here? Sound good over here? Because we have been having one hellacious time with all the technical difficulties. So it is good to be here with you guys to share some truth, to share some reality, and to share some things that you may not necessarily know. And I got the green light that I sound good. Hello, everybody in the chat over here on the red play button app, on the clock app, on the book app, and all the other apps in between. Again, I am your host, American Lumberjack, and as always, we start with prayer because we can't do this without the Lord, and we won't make it through what's coming without the Lord. So, dear Heavenly Father God, we thank you for today. We thank you for this awesome opportunity to bring truth, to bring clarity, and to bring something we don't know, Lord, because we are blinded by what is distracting us day in and day out, God. So we just thank you for your goodness, your mercy, and your grace, and your everlasting love that you bestow upon us. In Jesus' name I pray, amen. So we're going to jump right into it with a little bit of a video of our ding dong of the day. So it's like a moment of silence where we have to watch this woman who likens herself unto an artist. And most of her art, I'm not even going to give her name, not because I don't want you to know it, but because I don't want you to see the crap that she puts out there. Most of her art is nude, lots of topless women and lasciviousness and hypersexuality. But she was ringing the alarm bell for climate change. And she wants people to know that she is sad for the way America is handling climate change. So she hangs upside down in this bell and allows herself to be bonged around for climate change. However, she's nude in all of this. What the purpose of being naked, I guess, is just to bring a shock and awe factor to make you really tune in, especially the incel men that enjoy that type of behavior. Yeah, she was doing this for the funsies, for the art, for the culture, for climate change. And really and truly, I hope some sense was knocked into her, because in reality, that's probably the most ignorant thing I've seen all month. And we're just getting into May. But without further ado, we're going to jump right into our show. Like I said, we have a great show for you today. And hopefully we can do this all without some hiccups and hoops to have to jump through. But our first story here today is nuclear Korea. Now, most of you know that this show is all about America, so you're gonna have to sit back and be a little bit patient as I deliver this, because this is going to affect us in one way, shape, or form or another. So North Korea just made a huge and one of the biggest changes it has ever made in years by changing their constitution. So what they've done with their constitution is they've essentially cut South Korea out in its entirety. So the original constitution was framed as hopefully one day reuniting South Korea with North Korea, creating a united Korea. Well, Kim Jong-un said, yeah, ain't gonna be none of that. We're cutting you out of the wheel permanently, and there's nothing you can do about it. And that's just the way it's going to be, because we don't want to be a part of you as you don't want to be a part of us. So if you don't want to be a part of us, we're going to make it difficult for you all the way around. So that might not seem like much, but particularly you have to understand that North Korea, and I'm trying to watch my words before I go off the rails, because I'm going to go off the rails on this particular topic, because this particular topic is stupid. in so many ways, but from the American perspective to the rest of the world. Because why this ultimately matters is South Korea is an ally to the United States. You can go look that up. We do have quite a few allies, and South Korea is one of them. But if they attack South Korea, what does that mean we're going to do as a country with an ally? Hopefully, we do the same thing we do with Israel, right? Well, they've abolished this, but not only have they abolished this, they've gone along and said that they're no longer going to adhere to any treaties or administrations that has anything to do with them stopping their nuclear program. So they've cut ties with South Korea in its entirety, essentially, without saying the quiet part out loud, essentially saying, hey, you are now our sworn enemy. And if you guys know anything about North Korea and South Korea, they've been warring forever. Not as long as Palestine and Israel have, but they have been warring forever. And this is the only reason North Korea really hasn't done anything outrageous with South Korea is because America has been a buffer. We have a military base there. So it's very problematic. And now you add the fact that this country is telling the UN they're no longer going to adhere to any nuclear non-proliferation treaties or agreements or anything of the sort, because you can't tell us that we can't progress our nuclear program. You can't tell us that we can't have any nuclear weapons. And the big FU to the Middle East, to the rest of the world, to the United States, to the UN, anybody that tells them that they can't do what they're doing, they're going to do it anyway. So that's the major issue here, because we just went to war, and now I'm about to go off the rails because it's something I've wanted to do and continue to do until I can beat it into your heads, because it's common sense. But some of you don't have common sense. You don't even have sense at all. And that's no fault of your own. You've been indoctrinated. But what you guys have to realize is we went to war to stop a country from obtaining nukes. And then I get the rebuttal. Well, lumberjack, sir, they say death to America. Okay, cool. Well, they're lumberjack, sir, they're terrorists. They mistreat their people. They put their people down there, kill their people. Well, yeah, fair. Those are all fair points. Lumberjack, they hate everyone that's not like them. Yeah, well, fair point. However, Iran has no intercontinental ballistic missiles. Yeah, but lumberjack, China could give them one. China's not going to give them one, because if they were going to give them one, they would have already done it. They would have already done it, right? They would have already delivered the ICBMs to them. They haven't. Well, lumberjack, they're close to having a nuclear weapon. Well, according to Pete Hegseth, they're only chasing ambitions. Because if you go back and watch my show from last week or the week before that, you will hear Pete Hegseth out of his own mouth, not mine, from the horse's mouth, tell you that they destroyed the nuclear program, but Iran still has ambitions. And if you were to look up the word ambitions, you'd find out real quick, fast, in a hurry that ambitions are just dreams, hopes, and desires. So the only way to snuff out dreams, hopes, and desires is to snuff out the people in its entirety, because Iran's not the only place that says death to America, because North Korea does. North Korea is not the only country that wants to aspire to have nuclear weapons. They already have them. North Korea is not the only country, or Iran's not the only country in the world seeking to be able to strike at a far range. North Korea already has all of this. So last week, we covered the fact that they are enriching uranium and do not plan to stop. They said that last week. And this week, we have them telling the UN that they're not going to stop. You can't stop them. We're a sovereign nation. We do what we want. So my question that I posed last week is, why are we attacking Iran for ambitions of nuclear weapons and not attacking North Korea, who has nuclear weapons, who has the capability of firing those nuclear weapons around the world and hitting any location it would so choose? What's to stop them? Oh, we got a bad military that can stop them. Why can't that bad military stop Iran if they obtain this goal? What's the difference? I'll tell you the difference. And it's going to sound anti Semitic as hell, but you're an anti Semite as well if you don't like Muslims, because they're Semites as well. Israel is the reason why we're not attacking North Korea. Little Rocket Man, as Trump called him, has said that he wanted to destroy America. What's the difference between death to America and destroy America? If you honestly think that there's a difference, you might be one of those people I mentioned earlier, lacking common sense. This is not a game. This is not a game. And while we are busy with our pants down in the Middle East defending Israel, China's making moves with Taiwan. While we were busy with our pants down in the Middle East for Israel, North Korea is making moves that are some of the biggest moves they've made since Kim Jong-un's father was in power. So we have to understand that things are shifting and moving while America is busy. And these other countries see that we are distracted with other things. Hell, Trump went from Venezuela to Iran, and now he's talking about Cuba. But while we do this with these little fish, the big fish are making moves, prepping themselves, arming themselves, getting ready. So why are we doing more for Israel than we are for the United States? We have allies around the world. South Korea is one of our greatest allies. They also give us minerals that we need to make those little special handy dandy chips that we need to put in our machinery that make things go boom. So why are we not protecting them? Why are we not doing for them like they do for us? Just food for thought. I'm just putting the food for thought out there so you guys can think about things. I am not anti-Israel. I'm anti-doing things for other countries that don't benefit the United States. Iran getting a nuclear weapon isn't a problem for us, but it would be for Israel. Hell, it'd be a problem for Iran themselves because, if the wind's blowing the wrong direction, that's going to blow back on them. It'll blow back on them regardless if they were to obtain this. But we have been doing this game, the same old song and dance with Iran and Israel and nukes for a long time. Yet no fruit has come from it, just like no fruit came from Iraq with their weapons of mass destruction. You can call it what you want, misinformation, yada dee, yada da. You can let your... I have a video of Charlie Kirk saying the same things I'm saying. Since you won't listen to me, I will put that video out and you can listen to Charlie tell you the same things. Yeah, because you know how you guys covet the words of Charlie. He says the same things that I've been saying, but I've been saying them longer because my eyes have been open longer. I don't think people understand the gravity of where we are in this country when other big nations are making major moves and alliances that will soon turn their eyes to the United States. Or did we forget that North Korea gave troops and weapons to Russia against Ukraine? They're allies. They are allies. And while we're busy doing other things, playing other games around the world for other people who would not do the same for us, our heads are going to be on the chopping block. And while the pressure is building and continues to do so overseas, back home, Washington is trying to reinforce another front, and it says that it's been under strain for years. So our next story here is, if I can get it up here, Project Ballroom. You've all heard about it, and if you haven't heard about it, you've been under a rock. But the Senate Republicans just rolled out a huge immigration package, which is a good thing. That's America focused, right? That's protecting Americans because we like strong immigration borders and all this other stuff in between. That bill they just rolled out in the Senate, which is kind of strange, but I digress because the House of Representatives are in control of the purse. So why the Senate is making a bill that requires money unless it's a joint resolution, that's politics for you. But the Senate can't make bills requiring money, again, unless it's a joint resolution. But this is a $72 billion bill that they're rolling out. And most of that bill, is focused on enforcement, border security, and immigration operations. But like in Democrat fashion, we have the Republicans doing the same that the Democrats have always been doing. They buried something inside the bill. And is this something else that's being ignored, or are they just planning for something in the future? That's the way I look at it. So roughly $1 billion out of the $72 billion bill is set aside for Secret Service security modernization. You know, they love to give you acronyms and a lot of words. So most people look at it and they're like, and you get thrown off by the words. But that 1 billion is for Secret Service security modernization. Now, officially on paper, according to the way the bill reads, which I've looked over the bill, the language describes it as above ground and below ground security upgrades for the White House, right? But then you have critics coming in and saying immediately, noticing things in the bill, certain wordings in the bill, and calling it out. And it's pretty interesting. And they say because this funding comes at the same time as the discussion about certain plans to build and modernize the East Wing, the project might be looking to build the ballroom. Now, again, I have gone through this and looked through this bill and made sure it didn't say the things that they say it's saying, and it doesn't. However, we have to be clear, the bill does not literally say build a ballroom or funding for the ballroom, but the wording does not appear to, it does appear to be broad enough that the future infrastructure, once it is already built and connected to the White House and in that area, that this money could potentially benefit some upgrades for that particular area. Now, there is already an existing bunker under the East Wing that has been there for many, 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 many years. And if you guys recall, Trump complained back in 2023, 2022, 2021, 2020, 2019, I believe it was as far back, about the upgrades that needed to happen to Air Force One, right? And he has been vocal about the changes that need to take place with certain things that protect the First Lady, the President, the Vice President, and the Vice President's wife, and other important people. He has been very vocal about that. However, a lot of people are like, hey, you said the taxpayers weren't going to have to spend a dime for this ballroom. Now, you said you have donors that are going to give you $400 million to build this ballroom. And after this whole little shooting fiasco, this assassination fiasco, you have Trump sitting here saying, hey, we need the ballroom. And all the conservative and Republican talking heads are saying the same thing. We need the ballroom. Give him the ballroom. You can't protect the president. Now, let's be for real. Trump leaves office, the ballroom stays, and the next president benefits from it. And I do believe, do not get it twisted and think that I'm on the opposite side of this. I do believe that the president and anyone that is in that particular sphere needs to be protected because these people are the ones that make decisions for this country. However, I think there needs to be transparency. And one of the things that I've seen slip, but not go away in its entirety, that I've seen slip is the transparency from Trump and his administration from the first administration. This is why people ultimately lose trust in legislation over time. Not necessarily because security upgrades are bad, but because voters start wondering, what exactly am I paying for? You said that we wouldn't pay for this. Yet now, this money could potentially, according to the language of the bill, if passed, it could potentially give way to upgrades to that building once built. And if something is important, why not just present it directly instead of wrapping it up inside of something else? This is the largest issue I've had with the Democrats. They love to give you these 5,000 freaking page bills that you don't have time to read and then tell you got 4 days to look through it, to thumb through it, and then vote on it. That is not right. These people are busy. They are busy. Granted, they do not work as much as they should, in my opinion, but they are busy, and no one has time to sit down and read 5,000 pages. And even with the power of AI, which Congress passed legislation that allows them now to use AI, which I don't agree with, but even with the power of AI, it is still very difficult to get the nuance and the meat and the potatoes out of these bills to know what's going on, because they like to use vernacular and verbiage that will twist things in a certain way that if you say yes to it, you now just voted for something that they wanted and it works against us. My issue is, why are we now doing the same things, the bad things rather, as the Democrats? Some of the things the Democrats did were good that we should have been employing as the Republican Party the whole time. However, they haven't been doing that. Now they're picking up bad behaviors, and bad behaviors, according to the word of God, corrupts good manners. So you'll look bad, and you bet your sweet rootin' tootin' bootin' that the Democrats are going to point it out when you do it, whereas you didn't point it out when they did it. And you should have. You should have. Transparency should be not something you kind of do. It should be something you depend on. It should be something that you flaunt. And speaking of fights over government authority, because they want to talk about who has authority to do this and who doesn't, another battle is now taking place out between states and Washington itself. And this time it's over the ballots. In our next story here, we're going to talk about a little old state called Georgia. We're talking about Georgia. And in Georgia, some things have been going on. And it's more specifically talking about the 2020 elections. And still, this is not something that's fully out of the courtroom. I don't think it's ever going to be over until the people that support Trump and Trump are long forgotten about, because again, transparency is important, and whether you're Republican or Democrat, you should be transparent. But now this fight right here is unfolding in Georgia, and Georgia don't know how to handle itself. It don't, because they're saying some things. But ultimately what happened is a federal judge, Jean-Paul, if you want to be French, Bollée, ruled that that the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI, and the United States Justice Department can continue to hold more than 600 boxes of Fulton County election records and ballots. Those ballots were seized earlier this year of 2026 as a part of an ongoing federal investigation connected to the 2020 elections. Now, Fulton County has pushed back, and the county officials argued that the seizure itself was unconstitutional and that they demanded that the ballots, not all the stuff, but just the ballots, be returned. It's kind of strange. If something is unconstitutional, wouldn't you want everything that was taken, not just one thing that was taken? And they say, and this is their concern, that allowing the federal government to retain original ballots could damage the public trust in future elections. Boy, oh boy. Those ballots are already accounted for. How could it damage anything? That's already said and done. It's like someone giving you one of those tickets that you have to tear to get on the ride. Once it's torn, you can have the ticket back if you want, but it's torn. It's already been used. Once it's used, it's no more good. Yes, you can keep it on file and keep it in record, but it's gone. It's done. So how is it going to damage future elections for the federal government, who actually need the information from those ballots? How is that going to damage anything? But Judge Jean-Paul, he rejected that request. He says, hey, the county failed to prove the search was unlawful and unconstitutional. And at the same time, the Justice Department is also seeking, now, after that little pushback from them, they're seeking the identities and contact information of election workers connected to Fulton County. Oof. It's almost like you just keep digging a hole and throwing yourself in it, and then you get out, dig the hole a little bit deeper, and then throw yourself in that, and you get out and you dig the hole a little bit deeper, and you throw yourself in that. Now it's too deep to get out of, so you just dig it deeper and throw dirt on yourself. That's what you keep doing. There have been a push of federal subpoenas to Fulton County to release this information. Now, regardless of where someone stands on the 2020 election, whether you believe it was stolen or not, this is not the argument. This is a significant thing that has taken place because the election records, especially ballots, sit at the center of public confidence. And whether or not the federal power starts moving directly into elections and its infrastructure matters. It ultimately matters. However, if the states make a mistake, it is the duty of the federal government to put them in check, to make sure things are copacetic and on the open up. But people are going to ultimately react to this one way or another. This is one of those stories where pressure itself becomes the story. Because even if the investigators believe they are justified, the optics matter. Public opinion matters. Trust in the elections does not just only come from the outside and the outcomes of said election. It comes from whether people believe the process itself is being handled properly. And when the ballots, subpoenas, and federal agencies and investigations all collide at the same time, it looks a little weird. And the pressure starts to spread far beyond the county, and it starts to spread into other states. So people don't tend to like that. In my personal opinion, which I try not to give my personal opinion too much, but in my personal opinion, this needs to be done to set a standard. It needs to have a standard. The states have been, for far too long, allowed to run amok against the Constitution. If you want a perfect example, just turn your head westward at California, who have hundreds of laws that violate the Second Amendment. And nobody says anything because they've been living under it for so long, and they just go along to get along. And while the Georgia or Fulton County is dealing with the questions about their election integrity, another state is fighting to build up authority for itself. And this time it's the Supreme Court. So you have a representative over here who is out of the state of Maryland trying to make some big moves for the Supreme Court. This one is called Robe Action. So this fight right here is building up in Washington, and it's from the Congress to the Supreme Court. And ultimately what's happening, I'm going to butcher this name. It's Olszewski, I guess. Olszewski. Yes, it's a Polish name. It's one of those names that I have trouble pronouncing, but it looks like Olszewski. Johnny Olszewski is introducing a bill, or an act rather, called Robe Act. And this proposal that he's putting out would eliminate lifetime appointments to the Supreme Court justices. Now, I'm going to jump ahead and go off the track a little bit. I'm going to let you know Johnny is a Democrat. I'm going to get that out of the way. And it is a Democrat that is wanting to put term limits on. And you've heard for years people cry about term limits. There needs to be term limits, term this, term that. Okay, cool. The Constitution is set properly how it's supposed to be done. You just don't use it to your effect. Term limits are set because you can get people in and out of office. You can either vote them out or have them recalled if you know how to do it. I've taught people how to do this. I just can't do it with a few hundred people. It needs to be hundreds of thousands of people to do it properly, right? Because we, the people of each state, have to do it the way it's supposed to be done. And it doesn't even have to be done as a convention of states. You can do it if you just know how to write it and word it properly. But in this particular case, Supreme Court justices are left there for as long as they are because these people are supposed to be non-biased, right? So this guy, Johnny, wants to eliminate lifetime appointments, and he wants to start replacing them with an 18-year term. So every 2 years, because there's only 9 justices, somebody would come out, right? And that would be fine, I guess, if you want to violate the Constitution. And he thinks he can do it through an act. Sir, this is a constitutional matter. You're going to have to alter the Constitution with an amendment, right? Yeah. So this is funny on its face because it's dead in the water already, because you can't alter the Constitution through an act or legislation. You actually have to sit down and write an amendment and have that amendment go through the proper processes that are outlined in the Constitution to be passed, right? And that's a hard fight. So I think he's trying to weasel his way through and use use legislation to get it done, and it's not going to work that way. It's not going to work that way at all. So this would ultimately mean that the court would constantly shift over time in this particular act, and the supporters are arguing that the court has become too political, especially after years of major rulings from the courts. Conservatives 6-3 majority. That's what it's really about. Do you believe, and hear me out, do you believe that if the Democrats had a majority, which these people are supposed to be nonpartisan, right? They're not supposed to pick sides. Do you believe that if the Supreme Court was a Democrat majority, that this gentleman would be writing the Roe Act? Maybe some Republican would, but do you believe Johnny would? Nah. There's further arguments from the critics that say it's no longer feeling like the Supreme Court is an independent branch of government, but more like a political force used by the Trump administration, right? But there's obvious questions here. There's some obvious questions here. Would this conversation be what it is if they hadn't gotten rid of Roe v. Wade? Which Roe v. Wade should have never have been a federal issue in the first place. It was very much a state issue, and this is why the Supreme Court did what it was supposed to by pushing it back to the states. And this is why the Democrats never codified it, because they couldn't have. They had no legal or constitutional standing to codify it, right? If the ideological balance here leaned the other direction, which I mentioned earlier, would this even be a thing? Timing does matter in this situation. And this proposal kind of sort of looks like it's just something that's been influenced by the constant voting for constitutionality. You see, the Democrats want things to be unconstitutional because it helps them. It helps them push their narrative of, hey, we should allow anybody to come live here, no matter what. It doesn't matter what's actually happening to natural born citizens. We want these other people to come here, right? Now, to be fair, lifetime appointments have always been debated, as I stated earlier, and some people do believe that it should change, but this is not the way to do it. No, this whole system is set up perfectly. The system is not broken. I want you to understand the system is not broken. The people within the system are broken because they get there and they like the way things are, and they keep lining their pockets with the things that they want to line them with, and we don't say anything about it. And that really and truly is the problem, is that we don't say anything about it. We don't push the narrative forward and say, hey, you guys are supposed to be supporting us. Now, I was talking with my team member earlier today, and they were saying how they believe the representatives would change their tune and become more affluent if they made the same money as their state's lowest paid people. And in their argument, they said, and so that's my particular point, but in their argument, they said if they made what their states made, the average minimum in their state, I say make the low or double it. So if the lowest paid person in your state makes $24,000, double it, you make $48,000. But even if they made $70,000, $81,000, they wouldn't be able to survive in states like New York. So they would fight harder to make sure they raise the living standard in those states. It would change how our country ran in its entirety if we had it like that. But these people sit up here and they make millions of dollars off of book deals, $174,000, which is higher than any state form of living. $174,000 a year, you can live in any state comfortably. Any state comfortably. We, down here, have to make minimum of what is required. So in North Carolina, it's like $72,000. In New York, it's $81,000. In California, it's $90,000 to live comfortably, right? These people make well above that. They make well above that. So this proposal that this guy is wanting to do should actually be placed on Congress itself. Because we have people that are 80, 90 years old, people that are passing away in Congress making tons of money. For what? You shouldn't go in making $174,000 and coming out making millions of dollars. Oh, it's because of my book deals. You are not that interesting. It's because you're receiving lobbyist money. We know the deal. And this only serves to hurt us, we the people, because you guys don't get hurt by this. But ultimately, the pressure is on institutions, because this whole episode is about pressure being applied to places that are volatile. This is why we can't really say if the system is breaking or not, right? The pressure is on. And the pressure is on the constitutions and the constitutional rights as well. And that's another fight entirely. This thing right here won't go anywhere. I like this story, but it won't go anywhere because you're violating the Constitution by trying to change the Constitution by improper methods to change the Constitution. It just doesn't work that way. It doesn't. But when the federal government steps directly into the crap, you got to call them out for it. And this Johnny from Maryland is about as smart as they come. I'm trying not to be mean. I'm trying to work on turning over a new leaf and being a little bit nicer. But our next story here comes from Denver. And this is a 2A assault or an assault on your Second Amendment. So there's another fight over the Second Amendment, and it's heating up like it always does because, you know, people hate when the Second Amendment is talked about. And this is on the other side. So if you recall in Trump's first term, he was okay with banning bump stocks, which personally, I think there was two things here. And I'm going to kind of sort of defend him here, right? Two things here. One, I don't think he knew much about politics and the Constitution as it stood. He was no different, really, truly, than a regular American that just lives in America. And two, he was manipulated by Nancy Pelosi, and she held hostage things that would have benefited we the people. Again, she should have been out a long time ago to get legislation passed that would ban bump stocks, which thank God it got overturned because it's unconstitutional. But now we have this. The federal government is going directly after the city of Denver. The United States Justice Department is has issued investigations into Denver specifically. And under the Trump administration, they are now suing the city of Denver over what they call assault weapons bans, right? So there's a law that the Denver's ordinance has put into place back in 1989, so a long time ago. And in that ban, because that's what it is, it bans certain firearms and certain magazine capacities all the way to back 1989, so almost 40 years. And then Colorado, the whole state, also has restrictions, including limitations on magazines holding over 15 rounds and also certain types of guns. If you do your due diligence, you'll know this thing's off the top of your head. So the law that Denver has came into place after the Aurora theater shooting, and they said, hey, no one should have this type of weapon or at least this many rounds to put into these type of weapons to do these type of things. So this guy, to give you a little bit of history on the Aurora shooting, this guy came for war. He came in with tear gas and flashbangs and all this stuff to cause disorientation, to make people freeze and panic so he could get the best efforts in what he wanted to do. Now, if you look into the article that I'm actually bringing this story from, they say that the man had a high velocity magazine. Now, the magazine, if anybody knows anything about magazines, is a thing that goes inside of the weapon that holds the rounds. That's all it does. There's no such thing as a high velocity magazine. Velocity is determined by the spring that causes the firing pin to fire and the rifling of the barrel and the muzzle or lack of muzzle on the end of the barrel, right? So velocity is only controlled after the bullet is discharged, not while it's being set in place. So this already tells you out the gate that this law that they have in place is made by people that know nothing about firearms in the first place. But these firearms are commonly owned by millions of Americans for lawful purposes all around the United States. And because of that, the government cannot simply just ban them outright. They really can't ban anything at all dealing with weapons, but because of lack of understanding and knowledge that shall not be infringed means in all facets and forms, we let things slide because of lack of knowledge on our part, right? And the Bible says, my people perish for a lack of knowledge. All people perish for a lack of knowledge, not just God's people, all people. So their position is pretty simple. The constitutional rights do not disappear because a city decides certain weapons are unpopular or should not be owned by certain people. And Denver's response is this. Their officials are pushing back and saying, hey, Mayor Mike Johnson, who made the declaration saying, defend the law. And he goes on to say that the restrictions have existed for decades and help protect the residents. Well, Denver, I did some research into your particular city, and I looked at the shootings, and your shootings have increased since 1989. They've increased. Gun violence has increased since 1989. You have two very different arguments colliding head on. One side saying that safety justifies restrictions, and the other side saying rights don't disappear because government claims it knows best. And I talked about this a little bit last week. Actually, the last 3 weeks, every single time you cry about something and ask the government to fix it, they come in and they take a chip out of your right. And you're like, oh, yeah, this will work. But you have to understand something. Criminals don't care about your rights, and they don't care about the law. If they did, they wouldn't be criminals. They wouldn't be criminals. And these people are going to continue to be criminals regardless of whether or not there's a law or not. And then you have to look at it from the other perspective. The people making the laws are the biggest criminals of all because they're not transparent. They're not letting you know that they're doing this to assume power to themselves. They're not. But the DOJ has now created a specialized section focused on specifically the Second Amendment issues going on in our country, meaning that this is becoming a broader national push, not just to challenge local laws, but to potentially reshape how the courts interpret gun rights nationwide. Shall not be infringed is a declaration. I remember weeks ago, maybe even months ago, where I broke down the language. Shall is a decree and a declaration. Not, it's telling you, hey, this is a negative. Be infringed. You cannot go out of your way to take something from people because you think it'll make them safer. This is not like a parent pulling a kid away from a socket. You're not getting rid of the socket. You're moving the kid away from the socket. So how about we start locking these criminals up? How about we start giving these criminals the death penalties that take other people's lives? That would actually fix things because the criminal is going to think twice before they go do something stupid. And it's not just about guns. It's not. But a lot of you are so willy-nilly just to give up something just to feel a little bit better. And you don't even realize that every time you give something up, the government takes another step forward on things that should not be infringed upon. These are your God, whether you believe in them or not, your God-given rights. The rights that supersede you being here and supersede the governments being here. And you see countries all over the world stepping on people's God-given rights. Again, whether they believe in them or not. This is why we live in the greatest country in the world. It's because we have a way to defend ourselves from that. However, you guys keep seeing problems and crying for the government to fix it. They're going to keep taking it, and eventually they're going to take it so far you can't defend yourself. And this is where constitutional pressure starts to become very real. It really does. Because once the government gets the ability to decide which rights are acceptable enough to keep, every future restriction becomes easier to justify. And regardless of where someone stands on firearms, the bigger debate is really about where the government's authority stops. And if you know the Constitution like you're supposed to, you know that these are positive rights to you and negative rights to the government. The First Amendment starts it out. Congress shall make no law going against these 5 things. Your freedom of religion, they shall make no law creating a religion, a federal religion. They shall not infringe upon or abridge your freedom of speech. They shall not stop you from assembling, which assembly is not just a bunch of people gathering. An assembly is actually people gathering to discuss their rights. They can't stop you from doing that, and they cannot stop you from petitioning them for redress of grievances, meaning that if the government causes a problem or starts a problem or has a problem and you step up to them and say, hey, this is a problem, I need you to fix it, that's what the redress is, they can't stop you from doing that. But because you don't know that, they continue to step over your rights, step over you, push you back in a corner, and then you're going to keep letting it happen until it's too late. Sometimes it comes when people are quietly draining it from the inside. And that's going to bring us up to our next story, which is a banger as well. And our last story here, fraud of soda. Yeah. Federal agents just carried out a massive series of raids in Minnesota, and they've been targeting businesses connected to an alleged child care fraud scheme. Now, we know Minnesota has been doing some crazy stuff, so you know it's real. But what I would like to see really happen is people's heads start to roll for their actions. Because if we did any of this, you and I, us little people, we would be cooked. But back to the story. There have been a number of raids that have taken place, and out of them, 9 have found some staggering numbers. So there have been more than 20 businesses raided, and out of those 20, 9 of them have received more than $67 million in public child care subsidies, meaning that this money comes from federal and state, mainly from the state, but the federal does come in and help where the state falls short. And they've done so through the Minnesota's child care assistance programs. $67 million. And investigators are saying, hey, this was not a recent thing. The activity allegedly stretched across roughly 8 years of wrongdoing. Yeah. And now, here's the part that that starts drawing attention, right? Even as the funding reportedly surged in 2023 and 2025, the enrollment numbers largely stayed the same, meaning that the money increased, but the numbers of children reportedly did not. So if you're receiving all this money, you should be having more children in childcare, but they didn't. And that's what flagged everything. Actually, there was other flags going on. So I guess all these flags popping up, they just said, let's check everything. But that was a big flag. 67 million is a lot of money. How much money out of 67 million would change your life? Some of you, $10,000 would be plenty. Some of you, $100,000. 67 million. And this is why stories like this hit people differently, because this is not an abstract spending. This is taxpayer money meant for children specifically, and for families, and for care, and support, and a support system for people who depend on it. And when huge amounts of money move through programs like this without obvious warning signs, people start to wonder what's going on. Where was the oversight? How did this go on for so long? Why did it take 9 raids? Well, 20 total, but why did it take 9 in specific for everyone to suddenly start to notice? Fraud it's something that it happens every single day. I mean, the state of North Carolina, where I'm from, it just found people that had $12.7 million doing the same thing what do you call it? Somalians were doing in Minnesota as well. These people are cooked as well. They're going to get some major federal time. But why isn't it the people that have been put in charge being held responsible as well? Because fraud on this scale does more than waste money. It damages confidence in the systems that people live within. Because every time something like this happens, people lose a little more faith. They lose faith that the institutions that they hold to a certain standard aren't actually working for the people, but the people that sit at the top of them. $67 million. $67 million just out of 9 of these 20. And I will keep you apprised if I get more information on this and that the number goes up, which I'm pretty sure it will. I'm pretty sure it will. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. And why we're not applying more pressure to these people and the people that are responsible for this, not just the underlings that they give up to keep them safe. They throw fodder out to keep their necks from being put on the chopping block. But it's just something that we really should work on overall. It really is. Eventually, people stop believing in the institutions and the systems at all. And they don't believe that the systems can manage what it already is supposed to be doing, which they shouldn't trust it at all in the first place. But it's hard not to trust because you don't know anything else. You really don't. And maybe that's the thread that needs to be pulled for everybody to see what needs to be going on. Ultimately, pressure is a good thing. It can reveal things. Pressure on borders, pressure on alliances, pressure on rights, pressure on institutions, because pressure has a way of revealing weak spots, as it should. Whether a country is ready for it or not, doesn't matter. Really doesn't matter. You need to let this all sink in. You really do. You know what pressure really does, though? You know what it really does? It exposes things, not just the people, but everything. Everything. A bridge can look really, really strong from a distance. Perfect. But if you apply a little pressure, a little bit of weight, it starts to show its faults. And then suddenly, every crack starts to matter. And that's what kind of stories this has been for me. A bunch of cracks being revealed. Especially with this whole nuclear situation with North Korea, but while chasing waterfalls, as TLC said, in Iran. You have an actual enemy that can actually do the things that you say this other country can do, yet you're chasing waterfalls of another country. Right? This whole week of stories feels like that. Cracks here, cracks there. Countries testing our limits. Courts being challenged. Governments tightening their control where they can. Money disappearing. Rights being debated. Everybody says they're protecting something. Security. Democracy. We're a constitutional republic, by the way. Safety. Stability. But when you start putting that weight on, that pressure, it has a way of forcing priorities out into the open. And if you are paying attention and not being bamboozled by the serotonin dump and the dopamine hits, and you start to peel back the layers and look at it for what it really is, you'll eventually find out what's actually solid and what's not. A lot of things are just painted on to look nice. The Bible says that there's a lot of people that are like whitewashed tombs, beautiful on the outside, but are full of dead bones on the inside. Because when things are calm, almost everything looks stable. But when you start applying pressure and it builds up, that's when you find out what starts to bend and what starts to break. I'm your host, American Lumberjack, and as always, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for navigating the political forest with me. And make sure you're not one of the ones missing the forest for the trees. See you next week.